We're now going to take a look and continue with our 3B solving quadratic equations by factoring, but this time we're going to take a look at some examples where we have to find the GCF first, and it still leaves us with a quadratic equation afterwards. So we have 4 examples here to look at. The first is 3x squared plus 9x minus 12. My GCF is going to be a 3. And when I factor out a 3, I'm left with x squared plus 3x minus 4. I do not want to use the slip and slide, well, in this case we want to go ahead and just factor what's left. So we are going to look at what are the 2 factors of -4 that add up to 3. And that's x plus 4 and x minus 1. But this 3 that I factored, it stays there. It doesn't disappear. Now we are going to set each one of these equal to 0. To do so, I'm going to draw in some vertical lines to separate my problems from one another. And so I'm going to say that 3 is equal to 0, which actually doesn't exist. So that's not going to be one of my solutions. X plus 4 is equal to 0, and x minus 1 is equal to 0. And what happens is we can see that x is going to be equal to -4, and x is going to be equal to a positive 1. And so my solution set is that x is equal to -4 and a positive 1.
Pardon the interruption, but
for example 2, we can see that our greatest common factor is going to be a 5. So we're going to factor out a 5. That will leave us with an x squared minus a 4x minus a 12. And again, we're not going to use slip and slide because we factored out the 5. So now we're actually just going to factor this. So we have a 5 times x times another x. So what are my factors of -12? That add up to a -4. And we're going to use a -6 and a positive 2. And just like in example 1, we want to go ahead and set each of these equal to 0 and solve. So 5 equal to 0 doesn't exist, so it's not one of my solutions. X minus 6 equal to 0 and x plus 2 equal to 0. And so as we solve, you can see that just like before in our previous notes page, x ends up being 2 different values. And so we say that x is equal to the solution set of 6 and -2. Now I'm going to show you what happens if there's no GCF and the problems are much bigger. We actually want to go back and we want to use the slip and slide method that we used in a previous class. So I can't take out 2, 3, or 5 from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the 2 times 5 and create x squared plus 3x minus 10. Now remember that 2 is going to come back into our problem a little bit later on. So we're going to factor this into x plus 5, x minus 2. But here's where we need to add that 2 that we took out of the problem back in by putting it as a denominator. So when we simplify, we have 2x plus 5, and then we have x minus 1. So these are the new equations that we are then going to split and say that 2x plus 5 is equal to 0 and x minus 1 is equal to 0. So here we can see that x is 1, but on this side we want to simplify this 2x equals -5 and then divide, so x is actually -5 halves. And so my solution is -5 halves, or -2.5 and 1. We're going to do the same thing, in number 4, where we're going to multiply the 8 times the 5. So we are creating x squared minus 22x plus 40. And we're going to factor this, but remember to bring back that 8 a little bit later on. So we're going to think about what are our factors of positive 40 that add up to a negative 22. And we are actually going to be looking at negative factors. So x minus 20 and x minus 2. But this is where we're going to put in that 8. And then we're going to simplify that to be x minus, well, 2 goes into this, oh, actually we can divide by 4. So we have 5 halves here, and then x minus 1/4 here. But we don't want to leave the fraction. So remember, we take the denominator and we move it in front of the x. So this is 2x minus 5, and this becomes 4x minus 1. And these are the equations that we are going to split and take 2x minus 5 and set it equal to 0, and 4x minus 1 and set that equal to 0. And so we can solve, this is 2x equals a positive 5, and x is a positive 5 halves, and 4x equals a 1, and so x is equal to 1/4. And so here we have that x is 5 halves and a positive 1/4. And we will have some more practice problems like these in class.
Which one is this?